Thanks, Aman. Good afternoon, all. Myself, Devangshu, and as most of you would be aware, I run the investor relations and mergers and acquisition practices at NH. On behalf of the company, I welcome you all to the Q3 FY21 earnings call of the company. To discuss our performance and address all of your queries, today we have with us Dr. Rupert, our CEO, Mr. Viren Shetty, our CEO, Mr. Keshwan Venugopalan, our CFO, alongside Ashish Sukhija from the team. I'm sure you have gone through the investor collaterals which have been uploaded on the stock exchanges as well as on our website. Before we proceed with this call, I would like to remind everyone that the call is being recorded and the transcript of the same shall be made available on our website at a subsequent date. I would also like to remind you that everything that is being said on this call that reflects any outlook for the future or which can be construed as a forward looking statement must be viewed in conjunction with the uncertainties and the risks that they face. These uncertainties and risks are included but not limited to what we have already mentioned in our prospectus filed with SEBI before our initial public offer in late 2015 and subsequent annual reports on our website. Post the call, in case you have any further queries, do feel free to get in touch with us. With that, I would now like to hand over the call to Dr. Rupert.
Good afternoon to all. With a steady decline in new COVID-19 cases across the country, we are encouraged by the business revival across the network, as reflected in the India business growing sequentially quarter on quarter by over 33%. While COVID-19 business contributed 14.2% of the Indian operations during quarter three, as against 15.1% in quarter two, for the month of December, it has come down to 10.3%. Recovery in Indian operations, backed by the robust, consistent performance of our overseas Cayman Islands facility, ensure that we return to reporting year-on-year EBITDA growth for the quarter gone by after the pandemic-induced aberrations over the previous two quarters. For the month of December, in India business has almost fully recovered, having registered 79% of the pre-COVID revenues in the month of September. This has been possible due to the sustained momentum generated across units led by the NCR units and hinterland regions, as underscored in our previous call as well. In a very heartening development, you may have noticed in our latest investor presentations, our two NCR units have generated a positive EBITDA for the last quarter as compared to minus 9.6% reported in the previous quarter, despite the significant impact in international business. Going forward, this definitely augurs well for us as these newer units have significant growth runway and holds us in good stead by starting to contribute to the group profitability. As highlighted in our last earnings call, the three flagship centers do continue to lag the other units in terms of business revival, while still growing from 65% of pre-COVID revenues as reported in September to 89% for the month of December. As a result, the profitability of the India business remains impacted given the significant erosion in higher yield international patient mix, 11.2% of Indian business in Q3 FY20 to 2.93% in Q3 FY21, as well as a high-end cardiac sciences, 40% of Indian business in Q3 FY20 to 30.3% in Q3 FY21, and based on the elective work. With the operating leverage ingrained in the system, specifically the flagship centers, we remain hopeful about the profitability tracing back to normalcy over a period of time, with the sentiments improving all around. Our overseas unit at Cayman Islands, having fully recovered its pre-COVID revenues in the month of June itself, continuing its strong growth trajectory, delivered a 24.8% year-on-year growth in operating revenues at $19.1 million, resulting in more than doubling its EBITDA for the period to $8.1 million. Buyout by the performance of our maiden international venture and with know-how gained through our experience on the ground, We remain keen to explore such value-accretive opportunities in the island as well as neighboring regions. Moving on with our focus on improving clinical outcomes through digital initiatives, we are pleased with the response to our in-house developed ADI application, which stands for Atma Application for Doctor Insights, that it has received from the doctors that are at all our units and especially our Health City Bangalore campus, and have rolled out further product updates on the same. This application allows doctors to access detailed patient records such as medical reports, real-time data from any location seamlessly, thus ensuring better patient care. On the clinical front, our focus on providing highest quality of quaternary care is reflected in some of the highlights of this quarter, which are amongst the first such cases in our part of the world. The Majumdar Shah Medical Center in the Health City campus in Bangalore operated on a rare case of bifurcation aneurysms of the brain using an endovascular contour device. This is the first case in India and the third case in Asia. The, the Narayana Super Specialty Hospital in Howrah treated a very complex cardiac procedure called the transposition of great arteries through a pulmonary root translocations. The Children's Hospital in Mumbai successfully performed a fetal surgery for an intrauterine PU valve fulguration, that is an anomaly in the urinary tract, on a 20-week pregnant woman, on the fetus. The Narayana Multispecialty Jaipur unit also did a very rare cardiac procedure on a case with dextrocardia with tetralogy, which is the reverse positions of body organs. The Children's Hospital in Mumbai started the liver transplant program in December, and the Narayana Super Specialty Hospital in Raipur has done some very complex oncosurgeries in the last quarter. On the policy front, starting 1st December 2020, West Bengal government has extended the state government-sponsored Swasthya Sati health insurance scheme, rupees 5 lakhs per annum cover per family for secondary and tertiary care related in inpatient treatments to cover the entire population of the state. Given our meaningful share of business from that region, we continue to follow the developments and thus try to assess the impact of the same on the region's profitability with recalibration measures if needed. Separately, with the union budget being presented last week, we are pleased by the central government's emphasis on health and well-being as reflected in the increased allocation towards this sector, with total proposed outlay of 2.23 lakh crores, an increase of 137% over the budget spending of last year. The enhanced allocation, along with the plan to look at healthcare holistically, including nutrition, sanitation, clean drinking water, and pollution control, certainly augur well for the country. This initiative is aimed at developing capacities of the primary, secondary, and tertiary care health systems, and we hope that the government will partner with private healthcare operators to drive efficiencies in the system and strengthen delivery of healthcare services across the country. Looking ahead, we believe that the healthcare sector is at an inflection point with the effective implementation of the vaccine rollout program, holding the key for expediting the business revival. At the same time, we remain vigilant over the developments taking place in other countries with respect to new strains of virus to prepare ourselves accordingly. Thank you.
Aman, we can now open up the question and answer flow.
Sure, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may click on the Q&A tab and submit request. Your name will be announced when you are promoted in the question queue. Please accept the prompt on your screen and proceed with the question. Participants are also requested to limit a question to 2 per participant. If time permits, you may join the queue for any follow-up. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles. The first question is from the line of Divyansh Kalra. Please go ahead.
Hello. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So can you repeat the EBITDA from cable business? There was some break in the voice.
Sorry, Divyansh, what's your question?
Yeah. So can you repeat the EBITDA from Cayman Islands business? There was some
Yeah.
break in Dr. Rupert's voice.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reported EBITDA was $8.1 million for the quarter, that is post Ind AS, and adjusting for 450,000 Ind AS impact, it's on a pre Ind AS basis, it's $7.68 million.
Thank you, sir. So then just one more suggestion. So if you could add the EBITDA of Cayman Islands in the presentation next time, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
It was over there. Thank you.
We know the next one.
Sure. Thank you. The next question is from the line of Charulata Gaidini from Dalal and Brocha. Please go ahead.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're
Yeah,
audible.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, my question pertains to Cayman Islands. Cayman Islands, you said, has a EBITDA of 8.1%, $8.1 million, which translates to a 42% EBITDA margin. So even in the last quarter, it was above 40%. So is this the new profitability norm that will continue going forward?
Yeah, Charu, this is Viren here. I think maybe you or someone else had asked pretty much the same question last quarter and the quarter before. Cayman right now is under lockdown, which means they aren't allowing international patients coming in, nor are they allowing the local patients to go out. So what happened is that we had unprecedented inflow of very relatively high net worth Caymanian patients into our facilities who historically were going to Miami, Houston, New York for medical care. These are in a lot of the primary, secondary care, and OPD specialties that we historically never focused on. When the pandemic lifts and when flight starts to resume, definitely we can expect some percentage, maybe not all, but some percentage of them will definitely go back to the US because that's where their families are, that's where they have much more brand cachet. But a significant number will continue to get treated at ours. In recognition of that, we are making investments in the primary care and have started opening up clinics closer to the city, getting more into these departments that we've seen inflows from patients. So we will be able to retain some of that. We cannot promise that we can retain all once the borders reopen.
Right. Yeah. Thanks a lot for the reply. I do recall of this response. The second query is on the Delhi NCR. Delhi NCR has seen a major improvement in the current quarter. What would be the factors that drive this, and do you think this will continue going forward?
So there's two different things. For Dharamshila, it is a very strong onco hospital, and oncology was one of the departments what we saw. Even during COVID, it was pretty unrestricted, and patients did come and they did not postpone their treatment. Gurugram is also a very strong oncology hospital, and I think during this time, a lot more awareness came for the hospital because of the COVID volume, and patients started coming to us for other departments. So that led to quite a turnaround for the Gurugram hospital as well, and was able to achieve their break-even volumes much sooner than we had anticipated. Unfortunately, over the past couple of weeks, as you know, with all these border closures and the pharma agitations, definitely we've seen the volumes being affected for patients that are not from Delhi, because we get a lot of patients internationally as well as from the neighboring states. So it may dip again slightly, but we don't think it'll dip so much that it'll take it back to the old numbers that we were looking at. And so I would say maybe here or there, we can expect slightly negative to slightly positive for the remaining quarter. But I wouldn't say that it would go remarkably much better than where we are right now.
for this next Jan, Feb, March.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Shantanu Basu from Smiths Limited. Please go ahead. Shantanu, please accept the prompt on your screen. Yeah, thank you. Shantanu, please unmute your microphone. We are unable to hear you. As there's no response, we will move to the next question. That is from the line of Nitin Agarwal from DAM Capital. Please go ahead. Nitin Agarwal, request you to please accept the prompt.
Sorry, 1 second.
Yes, Nitin, we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Okay, sure. Okay. I'm saying, so there has been some development on the in West Bengal regarding compulsory health provision by the government, health insurance by the government. Can you just help us understand a little bit more on the development? What implication does it have on our business and plus our capacity expansion plans in the region now?
The Chief Minister has announced the scheme, Swasthya Sathi scheme, for irrespective of whether they are below the poverty line or above the poverty line, for their entire population of the state. So this is in line with the run-up to the elections, and they are in the process of issuing cards and things like that. But we have not seen any dramatic increase in the number of patients with these kinds of cardholders seeking care across our facility. But this, considering that this is a announcement by the government, we are keeping you informed, and we are closely seeing how this is panning out.
As for the impact, I would say if it gets executed exactly in the way they have described it, which is technically every person West Bengal access to government scheme, the short term will be quite painful because at least from a operations perspective, we simply don't have that many beds allocated to the scheme when everyone would want to occupy that. So I would say short-term challenges definitely, but long-term, what happens? It will be the same thing that we saw in other states, in Karnataka, for example, which did roll out an APL scheme, and we were initially very terrified, but then people start realizing that it doesn't pay enough. You don't get access to the best beds and timely treatment, and there are long waiting lists. And the government also realized it didn't have enough money to pay everyone, so they also started going slow. So I would say that this may be having a short-term impact, but long-term it will get normalized.
And Viren, the attached point was, Calcutta region, because of our capacity constraints, has been a target area of acquisition for us or inorganic growth for us. So I mean, does this imply development put us on a hold with respect to some of those plans and clarity emerges for, I presume they'll have impact on the asset valuation in the region, right? Or how does it work now in your assessment?
While I wish it would impact the asset assessment, it's not really translated on the ground. See, our commitment to West Bengal has been for the past 20 years and for the next 20 years as well, and even longer than that. So it doesn't change our appetite for expansion over there. And we're looking at multiple opportunities, both greenfield and brownfield, as we indicated earlier. Whatever we're able to conclude in as soon a manner as possible, we would. This decision does not impact our interest in the region.
Okay, perfect. And secondly, you did mention in your opening comments about exploring other opportunities, similar to the Cayman. So can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
We were looking at clinics. See, the thing is, our facility is located in the east end of the island, which is around 45-minute drive from where normal people live. And a lot of them have expressed that for every little thing, they hate driving so far. And so we took up space in one of the most prominent shopping malls of the country, and we set up clinics over there. We'll be running one more clinic in a small island called Cayman Brac, which is a very small population, but they're also in a primary care side. So in those sorts of things, we will be exploring opening up on the retail healthcare side. As and when the demand presents itself to look at something more significant, we would also explore that.
Thanks. And if we can squeeze in one last one on your flagship hospitals, how has has there been improvement in the in the footfalls, as we go through so in Jan and Feb versus the previous quarter, that's in Bangalore, especially in Bangalore, the two main hospitals in Bangalore.
Yeah, the OPD footfalls have gradually returning back to almost normal. And we've seen good growth in almost all the specialties, including the cardiac sciences in our flagships.
Okay, thank you and best of luck.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Kunal Mehta from Valum India. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. The first question I want to understand.
Kunal, you're not audible clearly.
Yeah, is it better now? Can you
Yes.
hear me? I'm audible? Yeah. So what I wanted to understand the status as it stands as on today with respect to medical tourism, because I think we pre-COVID we used to derive a good portion of our business from patients coming from Bangladesh to our units in Kolkata and international patients flying down to Delhi, which is flying down to Delhi and Mumbai. So just as on today, could you please medical what sort of
Yeah, so
recovery
I'm
have
going
you
to
seen?
the recovery has not been great. It's still, even though some flights have opened, the frequency of the flying has not really increased. And international patients mostly come to India on elective cases. It's very rare that emergency cases get pushed to India. Bulk of our patients do come from Bangladesh, and there again, the frequency of the flights hasn't resumed, but the land border has opened, and there are very few flights that come in. So we're seeing some traction build up, but yes, it hasn't really happened yet, and we're hoping that if the government goes towards some air bubble concept and starts increasing the frequency of flights, that we should start to normalize that. In the meantime, we're trying more on the ground efforts. Obviously, a lot of that is hampered by the fact that our people also cannot get there easily either. So this is just one thing that continues to be challenging, that in the short term, we are compensating through enhanced domestic activities.
Understood. That's very helpful. The second thing I wanted to understand was with respect to the Onco block at Cayman. So we were in the process of setting up this Onco block, and we have pretty good expectations from this investment. So could you please give us the status on the Onco block for Cayman?
Yeah, there, as I understand, being a lot more regulated country, the things such as planning, permission, and so on does take a bit longer. The other one is we definitely did take a pause. We were supposed to start this construction last year, but because of the COVID pandemic and the travel shutdown, we had paused it for not a whole year, but around 6-7 months. And then once we restarted, the whole thing has to start again from scratch with getting the permission and so on. So we're pretty confident that it should happen, in the next 2 to 3 months. We've identified the contractor, we finalized the drawings and so on, and the pricing and negotiate with the equipment manufacturers. So again, it will come up sooner than we hope.
Sure. So from now on, I think we are looking at a timeline of around let's say 18 months to commercialize this Onco block.
It'll be much sooner than that. It's just a cancer block, so it's not. It's just a bunker and a few things, so it won't take 18 months. About a year. But yeah, once you include associated delays and God forbid any kind of issue happens with the shutdown tomorrow again. So I think it can give us a good buffer for 18 months. But yeah, 12 to 18 months is a reasonable timeline.
Got it. This is one last question from my end. I wanted to understand the status on the capacity expansion in your key flagship unit in Kolkata, because I think, of course, presently I think capacity is fine, but I think we unit. We were anyway short of capacity. We were trying to use an adjacent building for adding a few operational beds. Just wanted to understand what is status there, because I think 8-9 months down the line, I think that capacity would be valuable to us. Just wanted to understand the status there.
Yeah, this again still very much in discussion. We've spoken with a lot of the building owners and chai shop owners around the place to, allow us to buy the land, demolish it, and turn it into capacity for us. I mean, we have to admit, like in this part, it's been quite slow, and we're, as frustrated that we're not able to get it done sooner. But as far as capacity addition in Kolkata proper, we have another hospital that has space, and we will be expanding over there. But yeah, it doesn't solve the capacity issue of our flagship. And even in that, we have been frustrated by how difficult it is to acquire land in that area.
Understood. Thank you very much for the answers, and all the best for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Milind Karmarkar from Dalal and Brocha. Please go ahead.
Hi. So, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Hi. So, my question was basically if you could elaborate more on what we are doing on the digital side, because especially after COVID, a lot of things are moving to digital. There is a not, I wouldn't say competitor, but another hospital which basically focuses on oncology, and they are doing a lot. They have a centralized sort of center where all the CT scans and other things are sent, which are then digitally, where the experts sort of view them. So just wanted to understand, because we were doing something similar, I think, in MP or Chhattisgarh. So I just wanted to know what we are doing on the digital front, because my belief is that going forward, especially for expansion, digital could be a big tool. Thank you.
Thank you for asking me my favorite question of all. 100% you're right. I think the COVID time has really taught us that, so for example, we built in 2 weeks an app that allows the patient to see the doctor virtually and for us to collect money. And that is simply because for past 2 years, we have invested in a very strong team who was able to very quickly iterate on the ground and be able to build tools that allow us to improve revenue, reduce our cost, improve the throughput. And yes, I mean, this is a huge investment made that touches upon multiple aspects. So the thing what you're describing, the thing about centrally looking at the radiology is actually a relatively old technology. It's not, I mean, there is something called PACS, picture archival, and we've had that for years now. But it's not so much that you have the digital tools, it's what you're able to do with it. And by centralizing, you're able to run a very central radiology team. So you don't need in small towns to keep people. But that's just, the first level of that. So we spoke in the earlier thing about creating this app called Adi. Adi is, if I have to use a fancy term, it's like a Slack for doctors. So now, because of COVID, doctors, one, they're very hesitant of getting into the ICUs. Now, what is the doctor's job in the ICU? You go, you evaluate the patient, you look at a lot of the monitors, and you make a decision, okay, increase some medicine, or you make some changes, or you prescribe a scan. Now, what we did, we spent a large amount of money getting all that information digitized. So what that does is it can real-time push all that information to their phone. So that means the doctor can be on the other side of the glass. He doesn't need to be in front of the patient. If he doesn't need to be in front of the patient, he can be at home, he can be in a different town, he can be in a different country also. And so now we've created these coordinated care teams for managing patients. And this again becomes it's initially a little slow to roll out because doctors still have to get used to the way they work, but it will change the way how our patients are being managed. And this is, then the potential that's available in the hospital. Now, we don't have too many apps yet that patients can use, and the things that a lot of the startups focus on wellness and weight loss and book appointments. We have all that, but it's not as grand looking. Like for us, we're focusing on money on the table. And that is all the efficiencies that are there in the hospital that can be addressed with digitization. And those ones we're addressing because that we see as this final lever that we can have when we run out of capacity, when there's a lot of difficulty in growing the top line and getting more beds. These are the efficiencies that we'll be using to addressing to drive further performance.
Okay. So basically, we are investing in technology. We are in, especially the digital technology, so that we are future ready. Let me put it that way, and it definitely would be extremely cost effective over a longer period of time. Am I right in assuming that?
Yes, absolutely. So our IT spending right now is 3% of our top line. This is coming from a time when we were spending only 1%, and we are very proud of spending only 1% of top line on IT. But IT is the enabler, as they say. And we expect this number to easily go up to 5% in the near future, purely on activities that will deliver very tangible results.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Chirag Kacharia from as an individual investor. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes,
Am I
Chirag, we
audible?
can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Please
Yeah.
go ahead.
Sir, I have a few questions. The first is on the cost front. Like, is there any room to reduce the cost on fixed or on variable basis going forward from the lessons we learned in last 2 or 3 quarter post pandemic? That going forward, that this cost will not more required or such that.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. One of the first things that we did when the pandemic started was a cost cutting where we addressed on the salary front. But that was a very limited exercise we were able to do only because the patient flow simply was not there. Now that the patient volume has come back to normal, the corresponding spending on the salaries and the manpower has gone up. But one of the things we realized because of this work from home, we realized we can run shared services in a lot of these support function like HR, finance, IT,
Like in terms
biomedical.
of what? Okay.
Yeah. So what that means is we can run centralized teams. So every unit may not necessarily have to have duplication of team. We can start sharing resources, but that is something more long term. We will start moving towards the system of being able to do more activities with fewer and fewer people, and they'll all be able to work remotely. So that is on the manpower side, what saving we can get. Unfortunately, there are some activities on the cost side which will permanently be high, and that is precisely on the supply chain side. Because of the supply chain disruptions, what we had, because of the rising import duties, because of the change duties and structures there, it will take a very long time for us to go back down in terms of the supply chain and the purchasing spend for the same amount of revenue than what we had earlier. Because there's too much ambiguity right now about supply chain disruption. We don't want to be too lean on inventory and tomorrow face any kind of stock out situation. So until the overall macro situation normalizes, I would say our cost base on medicines and consumables and all the supplies will be a little higher than normal. But essentially,
Sir, just one clarification. The supply chain side, is it due to the China we are restricting China import and we require to source from other sources? We require more cost, or it is something different you talking?
Yeah, it's part of it. See, the fact is, you have to realize China is integral to all the world supply chain. Even Indian companies, which provide the finished product, depend on a lot of raw material and input from China. As those things become more difficult, it doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means more friction enters the system, and the friction translates to a little higher cost for us. So a lot of the parts, a lot of the accessories, material, those prices start to go up. But even, regardless of the China thing, because flights are so expensive now, because domestic airlines are not traveling. So all kinds of air freight price has gone up. because the world economy is slowing down a little bit. There's not that much cargo containers going back and forth. So things like that,
Hmm.
generally slow down, you expect the supply chain cost to go up.
Okay. So, can you quantify, like on the cost front, as you mentioned, several initiatives which you taken will benefit us in long run. Currently, what proportion of our cost structure are those costs?
One second. If you have to say yeah. Yeah, probably we can come back to you on that. It's very difficult for us to come with an exact answer, Ahmed. See, I'm not talking, we've not moved the needle 5, 10, 15% here or there. These are not, big numbers. These are just definitely things that can be addressed. And so for that, I think we'll come with a more granular number, either, we'll come back to you, or in the next, investor call, we can probably start reporting on the impact of our digital initiatives and cost saving measures.
Okay, sir. So my second question, like government allocation in budget for healthcare and pharma is continuously in increasing trend since last couple of years. So from next 3 to 5 years point of view, post this pandemic inclusion to this topic, as an entrepreneur, what opportunity and threat both you feel that will come in our journey?
See, any allocation the government does for healthcare is always a good thing because you're increasing the overall demand for a service. If government builds more medical colleges, it is good because more doctors are there in the system. If the government builds more hospitals, that is also good because more people start accessing healthcare. If government starts spending money on providing treatment for the poor people, that is also good because some of that money can come directly to us. So I would say that anytime the government increases spending, it is always a good thing for the sector that it is spending money on. That goes without question. But if you ask me, quantum wise, if you say 1 lakh crore increase in spending, how much of that will come to NH? That I don't know, because a lot will depend on what programs exactly they are targeting and which areas they're looking at. But it's definitely a positive thing. I will definitely say this is not something that just because government is spending more on government hospital that it crowds out private investment. No, that is a very short-term way of thinking about it. The more spending there is in healthcare in India, the better it is for all of us, because then it means you're growing the overall market. So the number of doctors in India increase, the number of companies that are supplying to Indian hospitals start to do more business, and that improves our own cost of procurement and so on. So I'll say, yeah, the long-term effects either way are good. Whether it goes to private sector or not is not that different.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is a follow-up question from the line of Divyansh Kalra from Perpetuity Ventures. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. Sir, I wanted to understand what proportion of our revenues from hospitals are outpatient revenues. That would include daycare facilities for oncology, right? So yeah.
Divyansh, we don't have that figure readily available at this stage.
Rough,
So we can
rough
touch
estimate.
base on this.
Rough estimate.
I mean, let me get back to you
Okay.
with the exact details rather than just giving you a number out of thin air. So while we might have some rough estimate, but I would want to be absolutely sure about it and come back to you if you can touch base with us offline on this.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That would be good. So last one more thing. So when we calculate the RPOB numbers, so the in outpatient revenue would be included in that, right?
Yeah, it's a total revenue divided by the inpatient
Yeah.
occupied
Yeah.
beds. Yes.
Okay. Fine. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Divyansh.
I'm done.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to ask a question, you may click on the Q&A tab and submit request. A reminder to our participants, if you wish to ask a question, you may click on the Q&A tab and click on Submit Request. The next question is from the line of Chinmaya Varidli from Singular Capital. Please go ahead.
Hi. In addition to some of the behavioral changes that have been outlined in the previous questions, how do you see the whole hospital patient relationship evolving in the post-COVID scenario? What are other fundamental changes that you anticipate, and how are you prepared for them?
You almost screw it up. Correct? Okay.
The one.
So, bye.
Can they notice? Anyway, the one biggest difference, what we noticed is that now patients are willing to pay for being served online. Previously, that really was not the case. We've been running telemedicine for nearly a decade before COVID happened, but we were doing it for free, and the uptake really was not there. But with COVID, the biggest behavioral shift we saw, people willing to pay for healthcare online. The startups had been doing it in a very limited way, but most of the services they offered were free or of extremely low quality. But this was the first time patients were willing to pay, and hospitals of all sizes embraced it wholeheartedly. So I'd say, yeah, the biggest shift for us is a lot of the outpatient type services, a lot of the consultations were able to move online. And it has dipped, definitely. I won't say that we're at the similar trend what we were pre-pandemic, because someone who was thinking, rather than drive to the hospital, I'll just do it online. Now he says, okay, I can just drive and get everything done in one go. But we believe that this will continue to sustain and will grow from here, because once you let the genie out of the bottle, it opens up the opportunity for us to start looking at many, many more services that can be delivered. Not just outpatient, a lot of the post-op follow-up, physiotherapy, wellness, chronic care management, even diabetes management, which right now operates mostly at the fringes, even in advanced countries, not just in India. See, in India, we always have the digital literacy gap. And so what will happen in the digital literacy gap is that people will not be so comfortable dealing with these transactions online. But directionally, this is the way that our organization, as well as most large healthcare organizations, are looking. That is moving a lot more services direct to the patient and not going through intermediaries. And that's why our investment in a lot of digital infrastructure was done with the idea that we'll be able to start offering more and more of these ourselves, rather than being reliant on third-party developers to give us solutions that we'll have to go through and they'll charge a tax on that. So yeah, that I would say is one of the biggest behavioral shifts of this post-COVID situation.
So as a corollary, would you expect more marketing costs to access this larger, or convert this larger footprint into revenues?
On paper, you would be right, provided I were building up a separate digital healthcare vertical, which right now we still have a bit of a ways to go to build up the robust platform that will able to aggressively go after patients for only pushing digital business. Unfortunately, there are two problems with that. Problem number one, what I said earlier about the digital literacy, people are still not fully comfortable. And see, there are always the digitally native, people like you and me who are happy transacting online. But you and I don't represent more than 1 to 3% of the whole country. 97% of the people that are older, that just bought their first smartphone in the past couple of months, they will always be hesitant about transacting in that way. So we don't believe the market is right. Two is, and I'm sure this part on just the larger thing, a lot of the market on digital advertising has been spoiled by a lot of overfunded, highly valued startups that have really bid up the prices of the Facebook impressions and Google clicks and so on. So there's a classic thing, right? The CAC versus LTV of a patient, which talks about how much it costs to acquire his business versus how much value he provides. It is unfortunately still extremely skewed towards acquisition costs. So if I want to make the managers at Google and Facebook very happy, I could launch a very big advertising campaign. But as a responsible company that is dealing with public funding, I'd very much wait until a scenario where either acquisition cost comes down or we build up organic impressions in such a way that it doesn't cost me too much and I don't need to spend too much money acquiring every incremental patient. That is still, I would say, a couple of months to a year away when that, that behavioral thing starts to tilt in our favor.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you also see more patients being take insurance and that kind of payer profile changing going forward? Hello, is it better now?
Yeah, can you just repeat that?
Yes.
I'm saying, do you also see change in payer profile with more patients going for insurance, maybe?
I mean, we haven't seen it where we are. I mean, definitely we have seen a lot more cash patients, but that's only because there are not that many international patients coming in. But more insurance is always better. That definitely, goes without saying. More people with insurance card means more people are ready to access. But I don't think it's changed in such large numbers that it is swinging the demographic profile of our hospitals over here, because our ratio is still pretty much the same.
That's helpful, sir. Thank you.
But it'll happen.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Sameer Baisiwala from Morgan Stanley. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon. A quick question on Cayman, Viren. What's our market share over there, and what's our current capacity utilization?
So, Sameer, there's two ways to think about the market share. One is, if you look at market share of, you can hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay. So market share of procedures done in Cayman, it will be massive. I mean, depending on the kind of departments you're looking at. So for cardiac, oncology, a lot of advanced GI surgeons, all it would of procedures done in Cayman, it's easily 80-90%. Orthopedics, emergency, obstetrics, all much less. I would say anywhere from 30 to 40%. Given that we are one among three providers on the island, one of them being the government, two being private healthcare setups. But the overall market, if we have to compare the overall spend on the island of healthcare, and so that we did by taking how much money the government spends on healthcare and how much money is the private insurance company premium collected. If you go by that, we're not even 10% of the spend. So even though we're a huge share of money spent in Cayman by Caymanians, if you look at money spent by Caymanians on health, we're a small fraction. And that is something we're looking to much more aggressively go after in the coming years.
And the difference between the two, Viren, is getting exported out, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. But this export was not happening last 3-6 months, I would imagine. And it looks like when your capacity utilization on 100 beds is...
Your audio is breaking. You're not audible clearly.
Is it better now?
It's still breaking, but I can understand you. Go ahead.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So when the question was that it looks like your capacity utilization on the overall capacity, I think 100 plus beds, is still very low, maybe sub 50%. And for last 6-9 months, I would imagine that people were not obviously traveling. So your utilization has not gone up at all, no?
Yeah. I'll give you an example, Sameer. See, in India, we are so pegged onto bed utilization occupancy, and it could be because we're too, stuck on a number that's easy to understand. And it is. I mean, for a hotel, occupancy is some of the best things that you can use to drive. But as we've been saying for many years now, our business is different. We shouldn't just purely be looking at occupancy. But unfortunately, we haven't found out what that perfect metric is. And that's why we try to, do different combination of things to tell you what utilization in our hospitals looks like. I'll give you an example. Massachusetts General Hospital, okay, MGH, one of the biggest health providers in Boston. That is a 100-plus-year-old hospital, one of the best-known brands in the area, and this is a hospital with tremendous pedigree. And I've been there. If you walk past the side of the building, you'll be walking for 10 minutes, and you still won't reach the other end of it. It is huge. It occupies a city block. And my brother was based in Boston. He asked, how many beds does Mass Gen actually have? And it took a while for them to figure it out what the question was, because they don't measure it in the number of beds. So they did some research and they came back and said, yeah, this hospital, which is the size of a city block, has 800 beds, which just completely blew our minds, because they're not focused on the number of beds and inpatient. For them, it's just throughput, outpatient procedure rooms, linear accelerators, cath labs, just things that get patients in and out extremely quickly, and huge number of clinics that can process those kinds of procedures. So someone asked earlier, what percentage of your revenue comes from outpatient? And it's anywhere from 18 to 20% is what we sort of average out. And that's small, and that's true for all Indian hospitals. This is a number that we want to keep increasing, because the one thing we noticed with Cayman was that our inpatient numbers may not grow that much, but outpatient, really did incredibly well over this time when people were not allowed to leave the country. So the capacity utilization, we want to start looking at more in terms of attracting more of their dollars that they spend on these daycare kind of procedures, or on medicines, or on these basic checkups that we've historically never really looked at, because that also is a significant amount of spend in the Western world and will soon be in India also.
Yeah, Viren, this is very helpful. This is indeed a different way of how we should be thinking about your business. So thanks for this. But coming back to the Cayman question that you're now doing a top line which has moved from 10 to 15 now to more like $19 to $20 million per quarter. So where does this number go over next 4, 8, 12 quarters as we go forward?
It goes up, but how long it takes to go up? I would say right now, with the business being as it is, with no foreign patients coming in, we don't think the revenue number is going to grow appreciably for this next quarter that's there. It will go up a little bit, because what happens over there during this Christmas, December time, people generally don't spend. So there's a bit of a lag, which they recover in Jan, Feb. So it'll go up a little bit. But until our oncology thing comes up, revenue will stagnate a bit. Once oncology comes, it will grow again. We're doing a lot more stuff in clinics. So as the footfalls for that increase, the revenue will grow as well. But ultimately, it's waiting on us to make that next big jump in investment, which we hope to do at some point.
Okay, fair enough. But when, if I were just to persist on this one last one, when do you think you can double this revenue? Rough cut, is it 4 years, 6 years? How do we see that?
I mean, Samir, as much as I'd like to, give you the answer right now and make your spreadsheets easier to do, we can't make your job that easy.
Okay, fair enough. I'll let it be. So when the second question here is, how do we think about the cash flows, both for Cayman and for India operations, and consequently, how do we see the net debt as we go forward?
See, I think there has been, I would say, in the last couple of quarters, I think we had not so good quarters with regard to the government as a payer. But with regard to insurance and other payers, I think we had quite a decent, I would say, collection profile, both in terms of the domestic operations and the overseas operations. In fact, in Cayman, our proportion of cash and insurance is quite high when compared to India. So I think this will hold good for the future, at least another 12 to 18 months time. I think this sort of a situation will continue, beyond which we need to see whether will there be any acceleration in the payouts from the government. Otherwise, from a cash flow perspective, I think we are able to manage free cash as a positive, maybe till such time we embark on any major inorganic initiatives. So I think cash flow is quite healthy at this particular point of time.
So we expect net debt to remain more or less flat over next 3-4 quarters.
See, like we in the last 6 to 9 months, I think our capex expenditures have been quite low considering our normal run rate of capex. So considering the normal capex sort of thing what we used to have, I think we may be in a range, but may not be a very significant increase in debt even if it were to be.
Okay, got it. And one final question, with your permission. So for the flagship, Bangalore and one Calcutta facilities, how do we see the momentum build up here on? Is this a natural progression that over next quarter or two they go back to pre-COVID levels? And what can help accelerate this?
Bit of both. One is a complete focus on the domestic business and a lot of activities that are driving checkups, getting vaccinated. We're doing a lot of those awareness campaigns, working with corporate tie-ups, engagements. A lot of that will drive, these daily footfalls. The other is that as the economy unlocks even more, as people, COVID cases keep coming down, people start to get the sort of regular elective postponable procedures done now. And that requires a little bit of a mindset shift, and we've seen that happen a lot. But still, there are certain departments like orthopedics, for example, that really has not picked up in a big way for us, precisely because that is one thing that you can postpone indefinitely as long as you're willing not to travel anywhere, which most people are not doing anyway. So yeah, I would say that will take the normal course of recovery, and a full recovery would take until the end of sometime in this coming quarter. Post that, a lot of the drivers of the growth will come from our planned capex expansion and capacity expansion, which we've been putting off. As Keshwan said, we've really restricted the amount of new medical equipment and upgrades that we're doing, which we will do. Plus, a lot of our hospitals are due for a bit of a refresh, and we'll be changing the bed configuration, adding more private, semi-private rooms, doing up some executive suites, creating a more, a nicer experience for patients that can pay a little bit. And those are kinds of activities that will drive up the yield per bed for a lot of the flagship hospitals.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next question is a follow-up question from the line of Charulata Gaidhani from Dalal & Broacha. Please go ahead. Charulata, you may please unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I have two questions. One on the doctor fees. Doctor fees as a percentage to sales have come down over the last 3 quarters. Where do you see it bottoming up? And where do you see it, say, a year from now?
We had made a lot of structural changes in the as soon as the pandemic hit, wherever large minimum guarantees were given to doctors. But over a period of time, we've had multiple discussions, and we have been constantly reworking on the professional fee structures. And wherever possible, we have made changes to that structures. So in line with that, we see some changes will have to be made, considering that a lot of units have started to do well. But overall, the structures will be changed to make it more appropriate for the given condition. So we'll see that it will be going up marginally, but we won't see a major hike in it.
Okay. So we could consider around 21% of sales as a norm?
No,
it'll 24.
For your model, I think you can consider the pre-COVID levels, whatever percentage you had. I think that would be a much representative number to consider.
Okay, that is around 21% average.
No. If you look at it, the Q3 previous year number, this was like 24%.
Hello?
Yes.
So what Keshwan means by reverting back to that is not 21, but more like 24%.
Okay, fine. And second also, the progress on Western India. especially the Mumbai hospital. How is it faring, and how do you see it going forward?
Should I try joining from here?
Charu, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Mr. Sarkar, would you
Yes.
like to add? Yeah.
Yeah, Charu, your point on the doctor cost, as Keshwan was mentioning, or for a normalized business plan perspective, you can assume reverting back to what it was in the pre-COVID times, which was more at an aggregate level, like 24% for the India business. One of the reasons why it had come down was there was, as Viren mentioned previously, there has been some impact in terms of action that we had taken on salary cuts and all. With the in business now getting back to its original recovery and all, a lot of those are being phased out in terms of getting reverted back to it what it used to be previously. So as much as we had taken some initiatives, as Dr. Rupert was mentioning, plus please, as a base or premise, base case premise, you should assume that there will be, if at all, a upwardly biased from the Q3 numbers as a steady state run rate for the doctor cost as a percentage of revenue.
Okay. Right. And my question on the progress of the Mumbai hospital and where do you see it going forward? The oncology block in Mumbai.
We don't have any oncology planned in Mumbai. This is a children's hospital, and as such, we're doing BMT in a pretty big way.
Yeah, this children don't generally not subjected to radiation, so we will not have a comprehensive care in that context. But we will be doing the high-end hemato-oncology with the bone marrow transplant, along with the major surgical oncology program, as far as the oncology services there goes. While a lot of work has begun in the field of perinatology and high-risk birthing, which we have been planning to do because a lot of low birth weights and very high-risk pregnancies need a comprehensive group of pediatric specialists to take care of them, rather than being born somewhere else and then transport. So we have started the high-risk birthing as well in this hospital.
Okay. And by when do you expect break even?
I think we have been consistently maintaining that it will take some time, being the child-only hospital, for this hospital to break even. I think we don't see this coming in the next few quarters at least.
Okay. Fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the last question for today. I now hand the conference over to Mr. Devanshu Sarkar for closing comments. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your active participation. As mentioned previously, in case you have any further queries, please do follow up with us and we will get in touch with you to try to address that to the best of our abilities. Thanks once again for your active participation on the call today and look forward to such interactions in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of NH, we thank you for joining us. That concludes this session. You may now disconnect your lines. Thank you.